Good morning. Good morning, Danielle. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Lamed Ches. We are going to begin on top of the Amid, the Mishnah that will be speaking about a case where you have Shabbos and Yom Tov that are immediately one before or after the other. And the question will be, are they considered two distinct periods of holiness known as Shtei Kedushes, or are they considered Kedusha Achas, one period of holiness, or is there a doubt? How is that connected to ERUVIN? Very much connected. Could you place an Eruv for one day in one direction and for the other day in another direction? If it's two Kedushas, one day has nothing to do with the other, 100%. If we're going to view both of these days, Shabbos, Yom Tov, in either order, as Kedusha Achas for the dinam of ERUVIN, then you can only place either an Eruv for both days or no Eruv at all, or again, or there's going to be a doubt, and we'll speak out all the nafkaminas if we say that this is a suffix. This will also lead us into another topic related, the topic of Hachana, which is something that we spoke about a lot in Masechta Shabbos, that one is not allowed to use Yom Tov to prepare for Shabbos, nor Shabbos for Yom Tov. It is only the Chayil, a weekday, is there to be used to prepare for Shabbos or for Yom Tov, which means that even if one is going to be placing an Eruv for every separate day, so there's one Eruv placed for Yom Tov and one Eruv, let's say, placed for Shabbos, we're going to have to work out how is one allowed to place the Eruv again, mi Yom Tov, l'Shabbos. Why does that not go into the concept in the question of, or the Isur of Hachana? We're going to actually learn at the end of this whole maskana that whether you're going to be redepositing the food for the second day, it's a Yom Tov and Shabbos for Shabbos, or whether you're going to be re-walking to the same location to be koine shvisa through Eruv Beraglov, that is an act which does not demand any declaration, and therefore it will not end, it will not be problematic vis-a-vis the sugya of Achana, as we will explain. And finally, we're going to already pre-taste a Mishnah we're going to have on Daf Mem Dalid. What happens if someone at the entrance of Shabbos is sleeping? See, if someone is awake, their kavana is koine shvisa. Like if a person is out there in the field. So the rule is, okay, they don't have a whole city, they have their daladamas, and then they have 2,000 amas from either direction of their daladamas. That is only if the person is awake, so they are intending to be koine shvisa out there where they are. If a person is sleeping during the entrance of Shabbos, there's a machlikas tanoim. Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri holds, you're still koine shvisa. You don't need kavana for it. The Chachamim hold, chevre, you only have daladamas. You only have that daladamas. Since you were not awake and you did not have kavana to say, oh, this is my location for which you have at least the 2,000 amas in each direction, you only have your daladamas and a lot more. Let us start on the Lamed Ches Amid Aleph, on top of the Amid, second, third line, beginning with the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer Oymen. Yontiv hasamach l'Shabbos. Clearly, bein milafanel, bein milacharel. They are just adjacent. Doesn't matter in which way. Ma'ariv adam shnei eruvim. A person is allowed to set aside two eruvim, meaning two eruvim in opposite sides of the cities. One for Yom Tov, let's say if Yom Tov is Friday, and then it's Shabbos, the first for Yom Tov and the second for Shabbos. And he says that eruva barisha lemizrach, the eruv for the first day in our example Yom Tov will be towards the east, and ubesheni lemaidav, or barisha lemaidav ubesheni lemizrach, or he can say that eruvi barishan, I'm only placing an eruv for the first of these 2 days. Let's say again Yom Tov before Shabbos. It can be the other way also. I'm placing, with example Yom Tov Shabbos. What I'm placing now is only for Yom Tov. Ubesheni for the second day for Shabbos, given the eating. I won't have an eruv from. I won't have my marka mashvisa from the eruv. My marka mashvisa is the city. Or he can place an eruv out of Yom Tov and say this is only for Shabbos. That eruvi that I'm placing, from which I'll measure the 2,000 amas, the tchum, will only be for the second day. But ubarishan I'll be given the eating. In other words, this is the opinion that's known as shtei kedushas, and therefore one has nothing to do with the other. You have to place two eruvim, and you could place two eruvim. You can place only one, and you can place them in either direction. The Chachamim argue with Rabbi Eliezer, and they say, "Oy ma'arev l'ruach achas, oy eina ma'arev kol eker." No, one eruv. If you want to make your marka mashvisa lemizrach, it's going to be that way for both Friday and for Shabbos, for Yom Tov and Shabbos, or for Shabbos and Yom Tov. Oy ma'arev l'shnei yamim, oy eina ma'arev kol eker. Now, really, these two statements appear to be mamish the same, and the Gemara is going to ask that why isn't one already included in the other? It sounds like the Chachamim subscribe to the concept of kedusha achas. Ketzad continues the Chachamim. Okay, Ketzad meaning if you want to place an eruv for both days, and now we're going into a technical question. Maybe the eruv will get lost, and therefore it won't be there by the Bein Hashmashos of the second day. Now, hold on. Didn't we just say that the Chachamim hold that it's Kedusha Achas? Shouldn't Kedusha Achas also imply that you B'chlal don't need to place an eruv for the second day? Because the second day is like part of the first day. So as we'll see in the Gemara, the Chachamim really have a suffix whether it's Kedusha Achas or Shtei Kedushas. So therefore you have to be machmir from both sides. In other words, it's an eruv at the same direction for both days or for nothing at all. Mitzat sheni, since it might be shtei kedushos, the Chachamim also hold that there has to actually be the placement of the food both days. And here technically, if you place the eruv, let's say erev Shabbos, Thursday night for Friday for Yom Tov, maybe the eruv will be consumed. So Ketzad Yasa, what should you do? Take it there for the first day. Again, we're giving the mashal, the first day is Yom Tov. That means Thursday afternoon, a shliach is going to walk the food there. Clearly just quoting, again, Shitas Rashi, that there's another way to change your Tchum Shabbos, to make your Tchum Shabbos from someplace out there. And that is called to be Ma'arev Beraglov. Ma'arev Beraglov means if you physically walk to the place from where your Kohen Shvisa, from where you measure the 2,000 amas, you don't have to bring any food at all. But if you're sending a shliach, you don't want to go anywhere. The shliach has to place food there. So the shliach is going to take the food to that location out of the first day, Yom Tov. And he's going to wait there until it gets dark. But then, again, since the Chachamim have a doubt, it might be Shtei Kedushas. You need an eruv physically there, both in the entrance of the first day and in the beginning of the second day. So therefore, in our mashal, it's Yom Tov Shabbos, so you can carry on Yom Tov. So he takes it back. Ubaloi, and he takes it back to his house. And then Basheni, Machshecholov. Then on the second day, he goes back to that same location. It has to be the same location because could be it's Kedusha Achas. and you Zicher cannot make Eruv in any other location. You have to go back. You place the food there. When it gets dark, now it's Shabbos. So Shabbos you can't carry. So it's not, and by the way, it's not the end of the world to leave it there, because even if it would get lost or if an animal will eat it, once it was there during Bein Hashmoshes, it is effective. But here if you want, if you want, you can eat it and then return. And when Nimsa comes out that mistaker, you benefit by halichasi, you benefit by walking there, because if you would not take it and walk back with it, then you would not be allowed to use that location for your new home for the second day, because maybe you would have to say maybe the Eruv was consumed. Not only do you benefit because you can use that again as your new home, but also by walking, you actually end up eating it if you want. With your benefit, you can use it again, and you get to eat it if you want to eat it. Now, if Nechol Berishoin, let's continue in Shitas Chachamim. If it was eaten after it was placed for the first day, even though it was eaten right after it got dark, that I don't care. Since it was there Bein Hashmoshes, Eruv Elorishan. For that day, the Eruv was 100% fine, but the Ein Eruv Elisheni. But the Eruv will not be effective for the second day. So Amar Rabbi Eliezer or Amar Lohem Rabbi Eliezer, hold on. The fact that you are telling me that if you place an Eruv for one day and it gets eaten up earlier on, it's not automatically valid for both days. So aren't you moida that it's still Kedushais? Like he's telling the Chachamim, you're not making sense. If you are saying, if you're taking the position that the Eruv in one direction has to be that one place for both days, and either you do it for both days or you don't do it at all, so the Chachamim sound like they subscribe to Kedusha Achas. If it's Kedusha Achas, then just like if you place the Eruv for one day, if it's eaten up during that one day, earlier in the day, doesn't matter. It's effective. You don't say, it's only effective as long as it is be'en. If it's Kedusha Achas, that's what Rabbi Eliezer is telling the Chachamim. So then who cares if it's eaten up? It should be good for both days. It's like one long day. And like we mentioned, as we'll see in the Gemara, the back and forth, the Chachamim have a suffix, which is why they hold that on one hand, you can only place one Eruv in the same direction for both days, but it has to be placed twice. Okay, says the Gemara. First, we're beginning to quote the words of the Chachamim, like we mentioned. If you look in the Mishnah, the Chachamim, they seem to be repeating themselves. They say, first they say, Oy ma'arav l'ruach achas, oy eina ma'arav kol ikir, because Kedusha Achas, or we're now weighing in on the suffix of that side, that Kedusha Achas, or you ma'arav for 2 days or nothing at all. Isn't that the same thing? Fregt die Gemara, l'ruach achas ma'ninu l'shnei yamim. L'shnei yamim ma'ninu l'ruach achas. So Hainu Kamaisa, it sounds like they're saying the same thing twice. So the Gemara explains, no, Hachi Ka'amar Rabbanon Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbanon are having a dialogue, and here we're going to bring in a Braisa, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth between these two shittas. That's how they began. Aren't you Maida that if, listen, either your Shvisa is where you physically are at, that city, everyone has the 2,000 amas beyond their Makom HaShvisa to each Ruach. But either it's where you are, or it is where your Eruv is. Now, if you placed an Eruv somewhere, you can't say that the Eruv is only effective for half a day. And you can be ma'arav on the same day, half of the day in the north will be the headquarters, ground zero, and the other half of the day will be done. Aren't you minded to that? So Amar Wahen. So the Chachamim, so Rabbi Eliezer tells the Chachamim, Avol, we just had this a few daf ago. Avol means emes, this year. So now the Chachamim continue, well, Keshem she'ein ma'arvin l'yom echad chetzi l'darim and chetzi l'tzafin, kach ein ma'arvin l'shnei yomim, yom echad l'mizrach, yom echad l'mayrav. So it's the same thing. If it's two concurring days, doesn't matter whether Yontiv is the first or Shabbos is the first. Shabbos Yontiv, that's what it sounds like. It's considered one day. So either place an Eruv or don't place an Eruv. Either your Makom HaShvisa is in the city or your Makom HaShvisa is in the Makom of the Eruv, but it has to be in exactly the same location. However, Rabbi Eliezer says no. Rabbi Eliezer, Hassan, during one day, it's called Kedusha Achas. You can't change your ground zero. But if it's 2 days, Shabbos and Yom Tov, or Yom Tov and Shabbos, base kedushas. Now, Amar Lahem Rabbi Eliezer, now Rabbi Eliezer is the one that begins to challenge the Chachamim. I atem moidim, do you not agree? She'im eirav beraglov b'yoyim rishon, that if you went to a location for the first day, let's just be consistent, Yom Tov Shabbos, if you, not placing food, if you walked, you the owner, you the person who want to use your ground zero from out there in the field, and instead of sending a shliach with food, you yourself went there, don't you agree that ma'arev beraglov b'yoyim sheni, that you must go back there, be in that location again for the second day, which is really what he said in the Mishnah. It's the fact that if you are being ma'arev beraglov, you can't just go there erev Yom Tov and you're good for 2 days. That's the whole Mishnah of the Chachamim. You have to make sure that the food is replaced. Or v'nechol ERUVIN b'yom rishon, don't you also agree that if you made an eruv, not by going there, but by placing food, as they speak clearly in the Mishnah, and the food was placed before Friday, Thursday, at the end of the day, aren't you minded that if it was eaten up on Friday, which is said in the Mishnah, so it doesn't matter, the whole Friday you're good, meaning for the whole Friday, you measure your headquarters, your ground zero, from where the eruv was placed. But it's not good for Shabbos, right? The food has to be replaced on Shabbos. You have to re-walk there on Shabbos. Aren't you moided to that, which is what you said in the Mishnah? So Amrullah, so the Chacham tell Rabbi Eliezer, Avo, Emes, we agree to that. So now Rabbi Eliezer says, if that is the case, so Oibazoi be'emes, Beis Kedusha say, you are subscribing to Beis Kedushas, so you're not making sense. If it's Beis Kedushas, then why would I care if for the first day it's in the Mizrach and the second day it's in Ma'ariv? Why would I care if the eruv was only for 1 day and B'chlal not for the second day? You got to make up your mind. So here says the Gemara that v'Rabbanan sapuke misapke lohum atazay. The Chachamim, it's not, Rabbi Eliezer holds shtei kedushas, vaday. The Chachamim don't say kedusha achas. The Chachamim don't know whether it's shtei kedushas or kedusha achas. So therefore, v'hache l'chumra, let's go to the hache means, maybe it's shtei kedushas. If it's shtei kedushas, you have to renew it, either to be ma'arev beraglov again, or to be ma'arev with food again. But it has to be in the same place. Hache l'chumra means you have to put it in the same location, because it could be it's kedusha achas, and therefore it's from that same location. It's just a hemshech of the day. So therefore you have to replace it, but it has to be in the same location. Either there's no eruv at all, or there's an eruv the same place for both days. But again, you have to renew it either by going there or by placing the food. Rabbi Eliezer, this is weiter in the Braisa. Now the Chacham told Rabbi Eliezer, I atomoide she'ein ma'arvin batchila b'yom tov l'Shabbos. Are you not moide that you cannot place a eruv from Yom Tov to Shabbos? Let's look inside the Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom. This is very important. Right? I atomoide she'ein ma'arvin batchila b'yom tov l'Shabbos means im lo irav bein hashmasha shel elav Yom Tov. What happens if for the first day, meaning from Thursday to Friday, Friday is Yom Tov, there was no eruv at all. And now, is b'Shabbos. But for Shabbos, you want to have a different ground zero, which will be where you would place the eruv. If you did not, see, the Mishnah spoke about a case where you physically place the eruv Thursday afternoon. That's Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah. Elamah, you said this eruv that I'm placing now is for Shabbos. It's for Shabbos. If no placement was done at all, it's Rabbi Eliezer, Taka will hold that you cannot initiate the whole process Friday afternoon for Shabbos. So let's keep on reading Rashi. Well, if that's the case, does that not sound like Kedusha Achas? And you can't make an eruv in the middle of the day. Alba Kedusha Achasi, B'harei K'yom Echad, She'ena Yochel Arav B'chatzi Hayoim, Im Lo Erev Ben Hashmashas. And Amar Lahem and Eliezer tells the Chachamim back in the Gemara, Avo, yeah, if the eruv was not placed in the beginning, there was nothing done Thursday to Friday, you cannot begin Friday afternoon for Shabbos. Now hold on. Rabbi Eliezer Vadai holds Shtei Kedushas. The question, why not? So the Chachamim ask, it must be that Kedusha Achasi, or at least like us, you have to take into account the possibility, the tzad of the suffix that it's Kedusha Achas. So the Gemara explains, Rabbi Eliezer holds two Kedushas. The reason why, if you did nothing Thursday to Friday, you may not initiate the process from Friday to Shabbos, mishum, because of the rule of hachana. Hachana means preparation. As we'll learn a lot, that one may not prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos, which means now we're going to have to go back and work out the Mishnah, that even though Rabbi Eliezer holds Shtei Kedushos, and therefore it's two separate ERUVIN, and more than that, when you place it Thursday to Friday, you can't just rely on it for Shabbos because maybe an animal will eat it. You're going to have to renew it. Renewing it is not a problem, as we'll see details on Lamed Beis, because the initial placement for Shabbos needed to be done on Thursday. And not only was the initial placement done on Thursday, but as we'll see in the Gemara, very importantly, all of the declarations, the verbal declarations that one makes when you place an eruv, which is the bracha and the bedain, all of that for Shabbos has to be done Thursday, has to be done on a Yom Chol. And even though physically you're going to take it back and you're going to place it again, or if you're a ma'arev baraglov, you're going to have to re-walk, no declaration needs to be made. No declaration needs to be made. Now, the problem is that you have to replace the food. So if you have to replace the food, why isn't that considered achana? All that will have to be worked out. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer holds two kedushas. And you have to place an eruv for Shabbos again. But if you did not do the ikir on Thursday, on the Yom Chol, then you can't do it on Friday for Shabbos because you can't be mechan the Shabbos, Yontiv l'Shabbos. Guys, are we good? That's the whole daf. The whole Lamed Beis is going to work out in more details. And Tanach Rabbanan, we learned in a Bryce. Eruv v'raglo b'yom rishon. Still ma'arav v'raglo b'yom sheni. This is clearly, my friends, the shita of, let's go, this is the shita of Rabbi Eliezer that holds that it's vadai two kedushas. Likewise, nechol eruv b'yom rishon. Ein yoytza olav b'yom sheni. Because again, it's two kedusha, it's two separate days. Yes, if it's eaten up in the beginning of one day, you can use it that day, but not on another day. That's halachically separated. These are the words of Rabbi. Rabbi here clearly is quoting Shittas Rabbi Eliezer. Second opinion in this brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, Chavre Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Harei chamor gamol, beautiful lashon. I just want to explain something. I don't think I explained it when we had it a few days ago. The minig was that a donkey is guided from behind. The mechamed is behind the donkey. The one who guides a camel is standing in the front. That's the lashon. So it's like you have to be in the front, you have to be in the back. You're stuck. And chamor gamol means that you can only walk in a location that is covered by both the ear and by the eruv. There is an overlap. You can only go in the overlap. You can only go in an overlap because what's shot here? We're speaking about one eruv. So you placed an eruv, right, in the Mizrach, and the eruv was eaten up. Now, Chevre, if it's one kedusha, then for Yom Tov and Shabbos, I'm just keeping some consistent with this mashal. It can be the other way around also. Friday is Yom Tov, Shabbos is Shabbos. If it's kedusha achas, so then you put it all the way towards the Mizrach of the city. That became your ground zero. You count the 2,000 amos only from there. Kedusha achas means that this is going to be effective for Yom Tov and for Shabbos. Ayi was eaten up sometime late Thursday night after it got dark at the beginning of Yom Tov. Who cares? It was there ben hashmashos. It went into effect. You're bound to that 2,000 amos. If it's shtei kedushos, then on Shabbos you're like the bnei ha'ir. We have a suffix. If we have a suffix, then the only place you can walk is a place that's both within the 2,000 amos of the ear. And if that same location is also within the 2,000 amos of your eruv, because there is an overlap, only there you can walk. That's the chamor gamol. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda subscribes to the sheet of the Chachamim in our Mishnah that it's a doubt. It's a suffix Kedusha Achas L'Shtei Kedushas. And the Rashbag, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabbi Yishmael ben Noi Shel Rabbi Yechon ben Roiker, Oimrim, they hold the way this girsa is that Eruv Beraglav Berishoin Ein Ma'arav Beraglav Basheni. We didn't even have this in our Mishnah. It's Vadai Kedusha Achas. Likewise, if you made an Eruv by placing food, even if the food disappeared right away earlier on, as long as it was there by the entrance of the first day, it was there during the Bein Hashmashis, Nechol Eruv B'Yom Rishon, nevertheless, so what? It went into effect. It's Kedusha Achas, and therefore, Yoitza Allah Basheni, the ground zero, Yamarkim Shvisa is the place where you left the Eruv. Okay, guys, we're good. So here we have a Braisa, which is a Machaya, because in the Mishnah, even though the Chachamim sounded like, really we concluded they're suffix. Here we have the three shittas. Rabbi quotes the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, Shtei Kedusha is Vadai. Rabbi Yehuda and the Braisa is like the Chachamim, suffix. And these two Tanoim, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Shmuel ben Noi Shel Rabbi Yechon ben Roiker, they hold that it is a Vadai Kedusha Achas, according to this version. Now says the Gemara, Amarav Halachik Dalid Zekanim Halalu Va'aliba de Rabbi Eliezer, that Allah will be like the four elders, that all four follows the shita of Rabbi Eliezer that says that for sure it is two kedushos. Who are the four zekanim? Well, in other words, we're not even quoting Rabbi Eliezer. By the way, we don't quote Rabbi Eliezer because b'chlal there is a klal that Rabbi Eliezer Shamutehi either means he was the great Rabbi Eliezer that was put into a cherem, which is why, as a rule, we will not paskin like him. Shamutehi, according to some Rishonim, also means that he was mitalmidei Bei Shammai. We don't follow Bei Shammai as a rule, but nevertheless, the four zekanim followed the shita. And look at the irony. Who are the first two that Rav is quoting? The two that we just have on top of the Amid. The two that we have in our Braisa that hold Vadai Kedusha Achas. Doesn't fit. But let's read it inside. The four are Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yishmael. Now we're going to make the emendation of the Messiah Sashas. Rabbi Yishmael ben Noi Shel Rabbi Yechon ben Roiker. Number three, the Tana Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon. And number four, the Rabbi Yosi Bar Yehuda Sisim Ta'a. What is Sisim Ta'a? The Stam. Stam means, like Rashi says here on 10 lines from the top of the Amid, that whenever a Rebbe in the Mishnah quotes a certain Tana many times without even quoting his name, why would he do that? Because Rebbe is paskening like him. So since Rabbeinu HaKadosh so many times in Mishnah quotes Shitas Rabbi Yosi Bar Yehuda as a Stam Mishnah, so he became known as Rabbi Yosi Bar Rabbi Yehuda, the Stam Mishnah. Okay, so these are the four, or no, that Chad Minayu, one of the four, is not Rabbi Eliezer. Again, Rabbi Eliezer is Shamute, is Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar Stam, guys, as a Tana, is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Rabbi Elazar as an Amoida, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yechon is Rabbi Elazar ben Pedos. But this is a Tana. It's Rabbi Elazar, it's Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, and who? It's only four. Rav only quoted four, and who does he take out? Rabbi Yosi Bar Yehuda Sisim Ta'ah. Now the Gemara here is not going to go through where do we find that they said that. We're not going to go that. We're just going to focus on the first two, which is quoting the Rashbag and Rabbi Shmuel ben Noi. It's Mamash Estina. Asks the Gemara, Vaha, Rashbag and Rabbi Shmuel ben Noi Shel Rabbi Yechon ben Roiker Ipchash Mana Inalu in the Braisa that we have on top of the Amid. So the Gemara says, we had this yesterday. Guys, this is not that common, even though here in the Gemara it's like daf after daf. Eipach, it must be that the Braisa that we began on bottom of the Amid, on top of the Amid over here, quoting the three shitas, that you have to reverse, that it is the Rashbag and Rabbi Shmuel, they were not the ones that are saying Vadai Kedusha Achas, but they are saying Vadai Shtei Kedushas, which is like the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Now your question will be, hold on, the Braisa brought three shitas. If the first one was Rebbe said, like Rabbi Eliezer, if they said the opposite of our version, if they said that Vadai Shtei Kedushas, Iyachi, so they are saying just like the Tanakama, they're saying like Rebbe, which says Eino Chanami. This Braisa is only quoting two shitas. We quote Rebbe, we quote Rabbi Yehuda that has a suffix, which is mamish like our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, Vadai Shtei Kedusha Safik, in the Braisa, it's the same Seder. The first Tana Rebbe is like the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, Vadai Shtei Kedushas. The second Shita brought in the Braisa, which is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, is like the Chachamim Safik. And then it's a V'chein Omar Ashbag. V'chein going back not to Rabbi Yehuda, but V'chein like the Tanakama, Shtei Kedushas, so holds that Ashbag and Rabbi Yechanan Benoy, etc. Fragt die Gemara, hold on, Rav is quoting various Tanoim. That's ascribed to Rabbi Eliezer. That's ascribed to the sheet of Shtei Kedushas. Why did he only quote? For whichever versions they are, the Lechshav Nami Rebbe, the Braisa quotes Rebbe, and no, you're not completely invalidating the Braisa. You're not erasing the Braisa. You're being mahapich one part of it. Bechein. So in the Braisa, you already have three, Rebbe and Ashbag and Rabbi Yechanan. So the Gemara says, truth be told, Rebbe Tani La. Rebbe in this Braisa is quoting the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, Shtei Kedushos, but we know that the Loi Savar law, but he himself didn't paskin that way. So there can be, since Rebbe quoted the Shita, so it's quoted B'Shem Rebbe, Lav Dafka, he paskins that way, so we can't quote him, Rav cannot paskin when I was paskining. So asks the Gemara, maybe if this Braisa is quoting Tanoim that are saying Shitos, that they themselves don't paskin, like V'Rabbanon, my friends, the Rabbanon of this Gemara doesn't refer to the Chachamim, it refers to the Rashbag, and Abi Shmuel B'nai Shalrechem Embreika, maybe, Nami, Tanulay Savri Law, maybe they also don't paskin that way. So how can you quote the four Zakanim if maybe they themselves did not subscribe to that Shita? So the Gemara says, Rav, Gemara Gomerla. Rav had a tradition. What was his tradition? Both that Rebbe in the Braisa, Rav learned the Braisa, but he knew that Rebbe himself did not paskin that way. And Rebbe and Rav had a tradition that these two Shitas, first of all, Eipach, and they themselves paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, that Vadai Shtei Kedushas. Okay. Now, Kinoch Nafshi de Rafuna, just to say that Advarim, Rav was the big Rosh Yeshiva in Surah. A while later, Rafuna was the Rosh Yeshiva in Surah. Rafuna Rab Chizda was a father-in-law of Rava. Rab Chizda at the end, according to many, also became the final Rosh Yeshiva in Surah. But they lived together, they overlapped. And there was a lot of conversations between Rab Chizda and Rafuna regarding Rav. Rav was the big Rebbe, Rav was the founder of the yeshiva. So Kinoch Nafshi, the Rav Huna, here goes. After Rav Huna passed away, Ayil Rav Chizda, Lemirma de Rav Adarav. It can even mean that Ayil, he went up to that position, because again, according to many, Rav Chizda was the last. He was the last Rosh Yeshiva in Surah. But he was Rosh Yeshiva, he was there in the same place where Rav founded. And he asked about Rav, me Omar Rav Halacha Yidal Zakenim. That's the words that we started. Halacha Yidal Zakenim. And which are all Ba'aliba the Rabbi Eliezer, that what, my friends, Damash Kedusha saying, Rav said that, for Itman, we learned Shabbos v'Yom Tov, mamish the case of our daf, consecutive days. Rav says, Noil da bezeh, asura bezeh. Now we're going to learn this in a lot more detail, not that far from now. On the Sechtes Beitzah, that if an egg is born on Yom Tov, on that day it is muktzah, but it's not muktzah on the next day. Now, if we are saying that Rav is paskening Vadai Shtei Kedushos, why would Rav say that if an egg comes into the world, let's just use our example on Friday Yom Tov, it's also not allowed to be consumed on Shabbos? The whole issue is Noilad, as we'll learn all the various approaches to that in the Gemara, but that's only for Boy Bayayim. The next day you can eat it. Now, if it's Kedusha Achas, it fits. But once he pasken Shtei Kedushas, you shouldn't be allowed to eat it on the next day. That was the kasha that Rabbi Chizda brought up, to which Rabbi, right, Rabbi already the teacher of Abaya, Rabbi was the teacher of Rabbi, who married one of Rabbi Chizda's daughters. Amar Rabbi, I'll tell you why. No, Shtei Kedushos. The reason why if an egg, let's say, is born on Yom Tov, you may not eat it on Shabbos, like we learned on Amud Aleph, is because of Achana. In other words, the egg was prepared to be used when it was laid, when it came into the world. If it came into the world on one day, on that day it's called Noilat. But if you will eat it on the other day, it's going to come out that some action happened on a Yom Tov for Shabbos. And by the way, guys, Hachana is also Bahana. That's why it's because of Hachana. And the Tanya The source is a pasuk in Beshalach regarding the mun, that when the mun fell, it fell on Friday for Shabbos as well. And as it says explicitly, V'hoya b'yoyim hashishi, that the Moshe Rabbeinu tells us that on Friday we shall prepare for Shabbos also by gathering a double portion. Ve'echinu, end of quote, says the Chazal, Choyel mechen l'Shabbos. Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking about a Friday, a Yom Choyel, and v'choyel mechen Yontif. And that implies that the ein Yom Tov mechen l'Shabbos, the ein Shabbos mechina l'Yom Tov. Oh, and by the way, it's gavaldik. Here we're speaking about an egg. That means that the concept of achana doesn't only include a human action. Even if something happens, so to say, by nature, which is a chicken laying an egg, if it was laid on Yom Tov, you can't have it on the following day of Shabbos because you're using Yom Tov for Shabbos. So that is what the Rabbah said to Farenfer Rav. Now, we're going to have to work out details in our Mishnah, which is what's going to happen. Right, Talmidoi and his adopted son, right, Abaya tells Rabbah, let's analyze our Mishnah. We only began touching it on Amud Aleph. When our Mishnah says, Kate Sadhu Oisa, means even the Chachanim, they have a suffix. If it's Kedusha Achas, you place it at a Thursday night and you're good for 48 hours. But since they have a suffix, you have to place it again, even though theoretically you could have left it there. But the Mishnah says, no, food that might be eaten, you got to take it back, you got to bring it back. Why isn't that a chana? And you don't have to be there the whole time. You the shliach, but then, Basheni, you have to go again, and machshecholov, and then the Shabbos you can't carry. You can leave it there for nature to eat it, and if you want, you can eat it there also. Ubaloi. So 1 second, the Chachamim are, everyone is ascribing, even though we mentioned that if you did nothing Thursday to Friday, kula alma moida, that you can't do, if it's Kedusha Achas, you're finished. I mean, it's like making an eight of the middle of the day. But even if it's Shtei Kedushos, if you did nothing Thursday to Friday, you can't for the first time go and place an eight of Friday to Shabbos. Okay, so you are only renewing it, but so what? If you need to renew it, then the renewal is a hachana. That is what we have to speak out on Amud Aleph. Okay, that's what Rabbi is asking. Rabba, so Amar Rabba, couple of steps to answer this. Mi savra soif hayoim kaina eruv. Soif hayoim would mean that the end of Friday, either the beginning of Bein Hashmashos, or as we spoke on a few times, a moment before Bein Hashmashos, if the eruv for Shabbos needs to go into effect on the end of Yom Tov, that going into effect is problematic. That's called Mechen B'Yom Tov L'Shabbos, but that's not the way it works. Tchilas hayoim kaina eruv. Tchilas hayoim will either mean the last moment of Bein Hashmashos, or when Bein Hashmashos goes into night, but it's already considered the beginning of Shabbos, and Yom Tov Mechen L'Shabbos, but Shabbos Mechen L'Shabbos. That's basically what he's saying. You're carrying the eruv there. That's not called achana, as we'll learn. Just the act of recarrying the eruv, that's not considered something substantial as far as achana is concerned. If its halachic effectiveness would have gone into effect on Friday, that's achana. More than that, if a declaration would need to be made on Yom Tov for Shabbos, that would be achana. So it's going to have to be that even though you have to walk it back, either to be ma'arav beraglov again or to walk back to Eruv, since the halachic effectiveness is only going into on Shabbos for Shabbos, doesn't matter. The Shabbos mechina la'atzma, and go more the declarations, as we'll see in the Gemara in a moment, the declarations and the brachos, all of that will be made Thursday to Friday. And actually, if you have to do it for 2 days, because at least suffix shtei kedushos or vadish shtei kedushos, then you'll make a bracha b'lashon rabim. And you're going to say that because of this Eruv, I'm going to be allowed to walk from here, Yom Tov and Shabbos. All of the declarations have to be made on a Yom Choil. All you need to do is to physically walk there or to physically take back the Eruv. That's not hachana. For some reason, it's not hachana. If it would go into effect, Soif HaYom, it would be a problem. So Rabbi says, the reason why it's not hachana is because Tchilas HaYom. We're going back to something we just had on Daf Lamed Vav. Ya'orvu belogin. Remember, there was a case. He had a pitcher. The pitcher was at full yoim. Full yoim has the koyach to be mitkamei truma. Someone, a Levi had meiserishin, but the Levi did not yet separate trumas meiser from his meiserishin, which means it's tevel. Tevel cannot be used for an eruv. Someone put in this pitcher. They took from the untithed meiserishin wine in the pitcher. And if the Levi would say this is Trumas Meiser, it would become Tamei. So he says this will become Trumas Meiser Mishatachshach. So then the question is, can you use this for an Eruv? The Mishnah said, no, you may not. Question is, why you may not? If the Eruv only goes into effect, Tchilas Hayoim, by Tchilas Hayoim, Tful Yoim means the barrel, the jug, automatically loses its Tumah by Tchilas Hayoim. So it's fine. Let the Eruv go into effect. Why does the Mishnah say not? If the Eruv goes into effect at night. So we answer, we had this above, that even according to the Shita, that the Eruv halachically goes into effect in the beginning of the new day, in the beginning of Shabbos, but there has to be the potential for you to eat it before the Eruv goes into effect. One of the reasons are of a technical nature. The Eruv, as we keep on learning from many daf, has to be potentially eaten, right? It has to be accessible halachically. It has to be not locked in a closet if you have to break Shabbos for chulei. You have to be able to eat it. If I'm going to tell you that the Eruv is only edible really at the Tchilas Hayoim and not a moment before, well, I don't know, maybe now with an atomic clock, I don't know exactly when that moment is. I don't know where that moment is if I won't be allowed to eat of the Eruv already from before the time that the Eruv goes into effect, then de facto I won't be comfortable to eat the Eruv at the moment that it goes into effect, and therefore it won't be effective. So you have to be allowed to eat the Eruv from before. Before, it's not the night yet. From before, if that taka would become a Trumas Meiser, it would become Tamei, which is not good for an Eruv. Tevel is also not good for Eruv. That's why you can't be ma'arab the log. Elo, fighter, asks the Gemara, Haditnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, Oimer Yontev, Zamach L'Shamas, Bein Mila Fanel, Bein Mila Acharel, right, as we learned over here, Shtei Kedushois, Ma'arav Adam, Shnei Eruvim, and what's that Shnei Eruvim? One to the east, one to the west. Oh, hold on. Again, a technical question. Eruv is only effective if it's ru'uya to be eaten. Every Yid can walk 2,000 amas out of the city. Let's assume now, then the first thing we learned today in the Mishnah, that Eliezer is Shtei Kedushas, so I can place one Eruv in the east, one Eruv in the west. If I place it to the east at the border of 2,000 amas, now I can only walk 2,000 amas from each side of the Eruv. So I can place the Eruv, mamish 2,000 amas to my left, but then I would only be allowed to walk out of the city towards my Eruv. I would not be allowed to walk to the right on that day, because then I'm walking outside the tchum of my Eruv. So how can Rabbi Eliezer say that I can place one Eruv Thursday night to the Mizrach? The Havamina is 2,000 amas to the Mizrach, and then the other Eruv 2,000 amas to the Ma'ariv. I know that the Eruv only goes into effect at night, but before the night, I'm not allowed to walk to that Eruv, because before the new Eruv goes into effect, I'm still bound to the first Eruv Stchum. The second Eruv Stchum is beyond the first Eruv Stchum. So I can't technically get there. And if there has to be the Ru'uya to eat it, then the second Eruv B'chval should not be effective. Answers the Gemara, it must. The Gemara says that whenever Rabbi Eliezer is to allow you to place two Eruvim, one LeMizrach, one LeMa'ariv, it can never be that the one LeMizrach was 2,000 amas to the Mizrach, and the one to Ma'ariv is 2,000 amas LeMa'ariv. It can never be that way, because technically you won't be allowed to walk to eat it. Narvas, then, you're putting it, let's say, only 1,000 amas LeMizrach. That's the max. And you're only putting it max 1,000 amas LeMa'ariv, which means that the second Eruv is still within the halachic tchum of the first Eruv. Now, it helps a lot because you want to walk even further l'mayrav. For that, you need to have the second Eruv. The city, Bechlal, the whole city is like 4 amas. The whole city is like 4 amas. So if you place the Eruv to the Mizrach, or let's say 1,000 amas minus 2 to the Mizrach, you place the one to the Maidav, 1,000 amas minus 2, love dafka, just generally to the Maidav, as long as they are within each other, only then can you put them both. Me, Savra, Tanach, or B'Seif Al-Paim Amalekan, or B'Seif Al-Paim Amalekan, no, loy. The case must be the Manach B'Seif Elef Amalekan, or B'Seif Elef Amalekan, because it has to be Su'uda, Haru'uya Mibo Ayoim, you have to be able to eat it without breaking the law, without breaking Shabbos. Okay. Now, Baitaran Achana, we're not done yet. So we are saying this, for some reason, walking, renewing is not Achana. It would only be so if you don't need to make a declaration. Asks the Gemara, Elo Hod Amar Rav Yehuda. Eirav Beraglov Yom Rishon, you need Ma'arav Beraglo Yom Sheni. Likewise, Eirav Bepas B'Yom Rishon, Ma'arav Bepas B'Yom Sheni. In both cases, Frek the Gemara, Hakom Mechen Miyom Tov L'Shabbos. Guys, we have to read Rashi. Rashi, 9 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Right towards the end of the narrow lines, in the beginning, which is Friday afternoon from Yom Tov to Shabbos, you are doing hachana. Why are you doing hachana? Guys, walking is not a problem for some reason. Even placing the Eruv is not a problem. The Kash of the Gemara is about if a declaration is needed. Ooh, the declaration is called hachana. It's amazing. Now, why are we assuming that you have to declare again? Why couldn't you declare it before? And why is the Gemara only asking that on Ma'arav Beraglov? So says Rashi, he explains the Kash of the Gemara. In the case where you're using pas to affect an Eruv, Bishlam Ma'arav Basheni Bipas, then that you already answered. Even though you have to replace the bread, but since Tchilas Hayoim Koina Eruv, that it goes into effect in the beginning of Shabbos. Shabbos is Mechel Shabbos. And the Eruv, the Pas, Rashi says it's a given, Shetika, you don't have to make any new declaration. You have to make a declaration Thursday. You're making a declaration Thursday for Friday and Shabbos, but you only make it on Thursday. Shetika Mamela. Why is it a given that when you read the Pas, the bread, you don't have to make a declaration? I'll tell you why. That's the way the Achreinim explain Rashi. Because even though when you place the bread Thursday to Friday, you took it back because you didn't want an animal to eat it, if you would not have taken it back, bread doesn't walk on its own. It would have remained there. That means the action that you did on Thursday, theoretically, even nowadays, if you place the bread in a way that you know an animal will not be able to take it, a person will not be able to take it, then you don't have to walk the bread back and replace it. Taka, you leave the bread for 2 days. Bread doesn't walk on its own. To expect a person to be stuck in one location for 25 hours, not human. People walk. So, Ma'arav Bepas, since the action you did Thursday theoretically was enough for the whole 48 hours, it's not 48 hours because it doesn't have to be there for the whole Shabbos, but it would stay there Thursday night to Friday, and it would remain there. That's why it's a given that even though you don't want to leave it there because maybe an animal will eat it, you take it back and you replace it. You don't have to make a new declaration. The declaration you make Thursday for Thursday and Shabbos is zicher effective. But that's the Gemara's Havamina. If you're out of Beraglov, here the Gemara is asking, L'chura, you have to make a new declaration. And even though it only goes into effect, Tchilas Hayoim, but the declaration and make the declaration Tchilas Hayoim. So again, the Rishonim say that if a person would be able to be Machavim L'shois, the way God Almighty is, if you would say the declaration exactly Tchilas Hayoim, Taka would be okay. But just like we explained that the Suda has to be Ru'uya Lechem Li'Ba'Yoim because we don't know how to be Machavim L'shois perfectly. So we have to be able to eat it a little bit before. The declaration has to be done a little bit before Tchilas Hayoim. If you mistake Tchilas Hayoim b'diyuk, you lost the Eruv. So the Havamina, the Kasha is predicated on the assumption that if you're Ma'ariv Beraglov, you have to redeclare. And if you have to redeclare, and again, Theoretically, you can do it in Tchilas Hayoy, but practically you have to do it a few moments before that. That is really halachic Friday, Yom Tov. Vait, you're being mechem, Yom Tov Shabbos, Kavaldik. That's the Gemara's Kashem. Shabbos answers the Gemara, Amalei, mi savrav the Ozil v'Amar Midi, just like you correctly presumed in your kasha that if you're ma'arav bepas, you don't need to redeclare. You have to declare Thursday for both days. Even if you're ma'arav beraglov, you don't declare anything from Friday to Shabbos. You have to walk back. You have to walk back. You have to walk back if it's a suffix. I know that. Yeah, and if it's a suffix, you're saying it has to go into effect. It goes into effect on the beginning of Shabbos. Shabbos is Mechel lo Shabbos. You have to walk back before. I know that. Just walking is not a problem. Problem is only if you have to make a declaration. You never need to make a declaration. Now, Keman, according to whom, how do I know that no declaration is ever needed? Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The Amar Heftzei Hefker Koidem Shvisa Gavaldik. So Chevron Daf Mem Daled, the Kitzur, we spoke this out in the intro. When a person is being Makabel Shabbos physically out there in the field, you don't even need food, like we mentioned. The whole Eidov of Pas is when you're not there. When you are there, you know what you need? Ideally, you need to be Koine Shvisa. Koine Shvisa means, in the best scenario, that you intend, this is where I'm taking in Shabbos. The moment you bekavana took in Shabbos at that location, according to everyone, you have 2,000 amos in each direction. What happens if you are out there on a trip and you're spending Shabbos on the road, but you fell asleep Friday late afternoon? You're supposed to sleep Friday late afternoon. Many tzaddikim fell asleep Friday late. You fell asleep and you slept during the Bein Hashmashos period. The Chachamim hold that since you were not awake, you know what you have? You're Daled Amos. You were not Koine Shvisa. The Tanach, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri holds that you don't have to have kavanah. Now we're going to link now the following scenario. Just like the person is bound to his 2,000 amos, all of my property is bound to my tchum, even if I'm not walking it. So let's say that you made an eruv, which means that you're more limited going lamayrev because you put your eruv lemizrach, but you have more leniency to walk further lemizrach than I could. If you're holding on to my property, even though you are allowed to walk based on the 2,000 amos of your eruv, my property is bound to my eruv. What about hefker property? So there's a link that, at least in the Havamina, that according to the Chachamim, that you have to be Koine Shvisa. If there was a Heftzei Hefker, that means when Shabbos came in, there was no owner. So that Heftzei Hefker can only move in its Daled Amos. Now, in a city, halachically, the whole city is Daled Amos. But if you're out there, it can't go beyond, wherever you find it, only Daled Amos. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he holds that Heftzei Hefker Koine Shvisa, it does acquire 2,000 amos. In other words, no kavana is needed. Since no kavana is needed, no declaration needs to be made. The whole concept of making a declaration is because if you when you are asleep, you're kind of 2,000 amos to each direction, so you walk there. Why would you have to make a new declaration about it? And that's why, since we are subscribing to that shita, no declaration is needed, and there's no problem with Achanam. Says the Gemara, don't tell me this only fits according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. I will tell you, says the Gemara, nevertheless, when you're sleeping, you are not koina makayim, and therefore you only have daladamas, because the limatze amar, because even in potential, you were sleeping. When you are awake, you have to walk there. You re-walk there. Since the e-boy l'meimer matzi, sometimes we say that if halachically you can't do something, it doesn't count. We're not saying that over here. Here we're saying that since physically you could have made the declaration, so now you don't have to make a new declaration, which is why there's no issue of hachana. Let's hop another few lines. Amar le I want you to know that if my master, meaning Rabbi, his teacher, his father, if his adopted father, if my master would have heard Hadatanya, everything is based on walking is not a problem. Problem is only the halachic effectiveness of the Eruv. If it's Chal on Yom Tov, you got a problem. If you have to make a declaration, walking is not a problem. Who said walking is not a problem? We learned in the Brayso, so a person should not go to the edge of his field on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, to know what it needs for after Yom Tov or Shabbos. That's also, you're not doing anything, you're not saying anything, but you're walking. Similarly, right, like we mentioned, that you can always walk to the boundary of your city. Don't go there. We're not speaking about Tchumen. Even if you can go to there, don't go there. Because bathing, you can't bathe on Shabbos, like midrabanan without water, but you want to go right away on Shabbos, so you want to be near the bathhouse, right? In other words, just walking to a location for after Shabbos, for after Yom Tov is part of Achana. So if Rabbi would have heard that, he would have retracted his whole statement because you didn't resolve anything by saying that Tchila Sayom Kaina and there's no need of a declaration. If there is an issue with Achana, then you're still stuck with the Kasha. The whole walking is a problem. So the Gemara says, no, Veloyi. Don't tell me that had he heard. Really, Rabbi heard. And yet, Veloyi Hadarbe. The problem in the Braisa is Maris Ayin, which means Chosam in the case of the Braisa, it's evident to the onlookers. Why are you going near the bathhouse? Because you want to be close to take the Chapa bath right after Shabbos or Yom Tov. That's Taka Asa. However, over here, when you're being Ma'arev Beraglov, when you're going back to place the food, when you're going there, Lav Muchacha Milsa, and therefore it's not a problem. The problem is only walking is only Marasayin. There's no Marasayin. Why? Because an onlooker will say, when you see a scholar, when you see a Yid that's living with Torah, walking out there, you know what you think? He's absent-minded. He's so into his learning, he doesn't even know where he's walking. The onlooker will say, Shemaitza, Mishachte. He was being drawn by his learning. He doesn't even know where he's walking. If the person is an Amoritz, will say that maybe Chamra Irkisle, maybe he lost his donkey, he's looking to look for his donkey. Ooh, how are you allowed to look for your donkey on Shabbos and Yom Tov? Not a problem, says Rashi, around 12, 13 lines on the top of the Amid. If a person loses their donkey, as long as the donkey did not leave the Tchum, he can go find it and bring it back. We learned that on Shabbos. Hachana means I'm not allowed to do something on Shabbos related to an activity that I'm usher to do on Shabbos. I can't bathe on Shabbos, so I cannot go near the bathhouse because I can't bathe on Shabbos. But I can go looking for my donkey, because even if I find my donkey on Shabbos, I can bring my donkey back as long as I did not go beyond the Tchum, no issue. And therefore, since it's not Muchacha Milsa, yes, just the rewalking in itself is not a problem as far as Achana is concerned. God willing, to be continued.
Rabbi.
Yes.
It sounds from this that if it was Muchacha Milsa, like you did know that he was dafka going to places Eruv, that it would be problematic.
Yes.
I mean, that sounds like pretty.
We're not done. We're middle of the sugya. Wait. Okay.
We're saying you could go do it because no one knows that that's what you're doing.
No, it's not
but if they knew, then you taka would be usher.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. By the way, that's not a sign. That's not a sign. Right.
And we didn't we learn that Maris Ayin is even b'chadri chadorim. There's
once it's established as it being Maris Ayin, then I feel b'chadri chadorim. But if lechatchila it's never called Maris Ayin, then you can do it begoli and chanami.
All right, I get.
I get in chava.